everyone, Monica from Monzi Fitness, and today we are talking about squats. So stick around because not only are you going to learn what proper form looks like, but you're also going to discover what your squat should look like based on how your hips are made. Wait, what? There are different ways to squat based on how my hips were made? Oh yes, if you find that intriguing, then make sure to stick around to the end. And I've got 3 parts for this video. Number 1, we're going to be going into general form for the squats, what that looks like. Number 2, I'll help you discover how to place your feet and knees depending on how your hips were made so you can have a more effective squat and so that it can feel better. And third, we're going to be debunking some squat myths in real time. All right, so first off, what should the squat look like in general? There are a few rules to follow. So number 1, you want to have a neutral spine the whole time, the full range of motion. What is a neutral spine? Well, there's a little bit of curvature in your upper back and then a little bit of curvature the other way in your low back. You don't want to be like this. You don't want to be like that. Right in between is the neutral spine. Secondly, you want to aim to have your torso and shin at parallel angles. So this is what proper form looks like. Okay, so notice how my shins and torso are pretty much the same angle. Some people will squat like this, and some people will squat like this. Notice how the angles don't align. So I always tell my clients, pretend you are an accordion and your body is moving down and up like a zigzag way. So when my knees come forward, my hips come back, my shoulders move forward as well. And then the accordion stretches, and then it compresses, okay? And the third general rule is that you want to have your knees in line with your toes at all times. So notice how my feet and knees are pointing in the same direction. Some people will squat like this, where their knees come in. Some people, they will hear the cue, open your knees, and they'll go like this. But no. You want the knees in line with your toes at all times. All right, so that's the general form for the squat. So to find out which one is best for you, you're going to do a simple exercise laying down on your stomach. You can have someone watch you do this and tell you the results, or you can videotape it yourself and see how you need to squat from that. All right, so next we're going to test out how to find your perfect squat. Okay, so to do this, you're going to lay on the floor on your stomach. We're basically going to be testing out the internal rotation versus the external rotation of our hips. So you're going to fall in one of the 3 categories. Okay, the first one is where your internal rotation is a lot better than your external rotation. Okay, so when my feet go out, that's internal, and when I move them in, that's external. Okay, so the first case, internal is really good, external, not so good. That's case number 1. We're going to call that internal. Case number 2 is where your hips are more external. So that is where my external, where my feet go inwards, would be a lot better than my internal. And just to double check, you can do one at a time. Okay? So again, case 2, external is a lot better than internal. And lastly, we have case 3, which is an in-between. So that is, for example, what I have. That's where your external rotation is pretty much the same as your internal rotation. Okay, so what do we do with this information? Let's start with case number 1, where the internal rotation was better than external. Those people would squat best a little bit closer together than the regular average squat stance, and their feet would be pointing forward, and it would look like this. Knees still in line with the feet, except the stance is a lot closer. Okay? It feels really weird to me because, again, this is not the squat stance that I am made for. The second case is where external is better than internal. So for those people, they would step wider and they would point their toes out even more. Their squat would look like this, still getting the knees in line with the toes, much wider stance. Now this feels okay for me, but it's still not the best. So then that brings us to case number 3. If you found that your internal and external rotation was pretty much the same, you're going to squat like this. So stepping a little bit wider than hip width apart. You can have your toes a little bit out, right? Internal is straightforward, and if you fall in between, you're going to have your toes a little bit out. And like that, down and up, knees in line with the toes. That feels the best for me because, again, my internal and external are roughly the same, while the other two don't feel as good. So give that a try. And remember, no matter what stance you have, maintain that neutral spine and have those knees in line with your toes. All right, and lastly, we are going to get into some myth debunking. I'm going to grab my phone here and let's look up some myths about squats. Okay, squat myth number 1. Squats in general are dangerous. No, they are not. They are a very functional movement. Think about every time you sit on the toilet, sit into a chair, sit into your car, and you come back up. You are doing squats. If you are weak in squats or you don't have the mobility, then you are going to have other problems in your day-to-day life just because we do them so often. It might not look structured like this. You're still having the same body mechanics and the same movement. I understand that certain people are told not to squat because their back, hips, knees are not doing well. However, you need to be able to squat. So, if you have some physical problems that prevent you from squatting well, you have to first gain mobility and then strength and stability, and then get into your squats. Number 2, you shouldn't squat to full depth or below parallel. So this is what parallel is, right? Where this bone is parallel to the ground. They say not to go lower. However, if you can maintain your feet on the floor and a neutral spine, there is no reason why you can't squat that low. I mentioned this in my other videos. We want to be strong in our full range of motion. And if your body is able to go this low, then you should make it strong in its full range of motion. Okay. Number 3, your knees shouldn't go over your toes. I don't know where this came from. I learned it in school, but I've learned through experience and with coaching over 100 clients that that is not the case. Okay, so think about it. Okay, there are 2 main rules for this. Number 1, if you have really long legs like myself compared to the rest of your body, your knees are going to go over your toes. The second part of it comes down to the second myth that we just talked about, where you don't want to be going into your full depth. And if your leg is able to bend that, assuming you have proper form, there is no reason why you cannot train in that range of motion. In fact, you should maximize your range of motion and then get strong in the full range of motion. All right, and then just a fourth one, it's not really a myth. I just see a lot of people doing it. So many people, they lack the proper ankle mobility to do their squats without their heels lifting, right? So because there's so much tightness here when they go to squat, their ankles want to lift, or they're limited and can't get that range of motion. And what I see people do, even trainers getting their clients to do, is to elevate their heels on something to compensate for the lack of mobility in the ankle. This is what I think of that. Number 1, if you lack mobility, don't compensate it just yet by elevating your heels, for example, in a squat. Work on your mobility first. Get it to a point where it's your maximum range of motion that you can get. If you've never had an injury in your ankle, there's no reason why you can't restore your mobility to what it once was. So give that a try first. Secondly, if you have injured your ankle, still do the mobility exercises, because what happens is after an injury, the surrounding tissues and all the muscles will contract and just get tighter to protect that joint. So when you work on mobilizing it, you can restore a lot of the mobility. This is important because you want to do everything you can naturally to gain mobility. And then after you've given it all, then if needed, you can do things like elevating your heel. So you now know the general form of squats, how to find your perfect squat, and we've also debunked common myths that honestly keep people less strong and less mobile. We want the opposite. If you found this video helpful, make sure to check out my other videos. I've posted one recently on ankle mobility, which definitely helps you improve your squat, especially if it looks like this. And I also have a hip mobility sequence that will open up your hip joints so you can achieve a greater depth in your squat. Have a great day. Make sure to get a workout in, and I'll see you in the next one.